Everybody Calls Me Father by Father X. Chapter 1. My name is Bob. Although I am only 24, everybody calls me Father, including folks who are twice my age or even 3 times. This is because I am a priest, and it is my business to be a spiritual father to my people, doing for them the things of God, which include more things than you might think. I stand 5 feet 10 inches, which I suppose is a reasonably handsome height, but outside of that, my looks are something to make horses shy. St. Thomas Aquinas, who thought up all the right things to say, defined beauty as orderly variety. I must say that I consider my variety very disorderly, and so does everybody else. My nose would be more suitable for a penguin, and so would my stomach. Even my mother does not love my hair. I remember my brother's hair was silky and golden, and the family thought so much of it that they put a lock in the family Bible. But I guess they figured they got enough of looking at my hair on my head, without coming upon it in the Sermon on the Mount. They didn't even put my hair in Karl Marx's Das Kapital, which my father got stuck with in some Book of the Month deal. Now, with Harry Colley, it's different. He is a very handsome priest indeed, and could probably be in the movies. I remember one day when we are still in the seminary. My best friend, Pat O'Malley, has a very dazzling visitor in the person of his breathtaking second cousin, Mary O'Malley. Miss O'Malley's visit is quite an event, and seeing that I do not have any beauteous visitors of my own, I am standing around this day talking with her, when along comes Harry Colley, looking like something in a toothpaste ad. Immediately, Mary O'Malley stops talking with me and gets round-eyed and heaves a sigh which I consider very lugubrious, and says in a stricken voice, "What a shame for such a handsome boy to be studying for the priesthood. How lucky some girl would be to have him." At the time, I do not say anything, because I am a mannerly chap and do not go around scolding beauteous second cousins of my friends. But after Mary O'Malley is gone, and I am able to think calmly, I come to the conclusion that her remark is very unchristian indeed. What does she want to do? Reserve all the good-looking men for worldly affairs, and let God have only potatoes like me? If so, that would be something for the Congregation for the Propagation of the Faith to be worrying about, because it would take away one argument which everybody can understand. As long as we can point to fellows like Harry Colley and say, "Look, there's a chap so handsome that he could have the world at his feet, and he has given it all up for Christ," why, we've got something. Otherwise, people would think that the only boys who become priests are the ones that nobody could love but God and their mothers, and even the latter only with considerable effort. This is not so, as the many Harry Colleys go to prove. To get back to Pat O'Malley. Pat, as I said, is my best friend in the seminary, but he does not become a priest. Instead, he meets a beautiful girl and falls in love and gets married. All the other seminarians see his point of view, even if they do not emulate him. As I have explained to innumerable questioners since my ordination, the Church does not believe that priests ought to get married. Christ did not marry, and we are supposed to follow in his footsteps. Also, since Christ allows priests to share in his priesthood, it is a good idea to make some sacrifice to show gratitude. The Church believes that not getting married is quite a notable sacrifice, and I must say that I agree. Also, the Church figures that if priests had wives, this would make things very complicated, because when they were called to visit the sick, they might have to decline, because the lady of the house would put her foot down, saying, "Do you think I want you coming home and giving the kids smallpox or spinal meningitis or polio or something?" You could not blame her for that, but it would not be a good idea for the sick person, because he or she might die without getting his or her sins forgiven, and that would not be so good. The Church further believes that a priest should be a spiritual father to everyone in the parish. They should be able to tell him their most secret thoughts and even sins. People would not like doing this if they had a kind of fear that maybe he would be telling everything to his wife, as husbands normally do. Also, it is a very good thing for a priest not to have all his time taken with a wife and children, because if he doesn't, he can do a great deal of praying and studying and helping the poor, and so on. Catholics, including O'Malley, think the church is quite right and would be the last ones in the world to want their priests getting married. That is why, when O'Malley meets his beautiful wife and falls in love, he determines that he will leave the seminary. The reason I am a priest is because I can never get out of my head the quotation, "What does it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his immortal soul?" Even when I am a tousle-haired kid, every time I think about that, I begin to feel that I ought to be a priest. This is also St. Ignatius Loyola's favorite quotation, and so I figure I am traveling in pretty fast company. When I am a teenager, there are times when I believe that I should not be a priest, and kind of forget the quotation. This mostly comes to pass at dances where the girls are exceedingly beautiful, or when I observe natty fellows dashing around in yellow convertibles. However, after I go home and think it over, I weigh the quotation against the girls and the convertibles, and the quotation wins hands down. That is why I decide to become a priest. However, I do not find it easy. I am as human as anybody, and I have strenuous objections to giving up all the nice things of the world, particularly, as I have said, beautiful girls and yellow convertibles. However, one day I say to myself that I must stop shillying and shallying. Give it a trial. Go to the seminary, I say to myself. After all, you don't have to stay. This is how it comes to pass that I find myself in the seminary. I do not take any honors. In fact, I come very near to failing. For quite some time, I applied the technique I had developed in college of boning up on my studies enough to get by. I do this in a hurry, then saunter into the corridor to talk things over with the other fellows. One day, when I am elaborating on the Yankees' chances of winning the pennant, the rector comes along behind me, and, without caring whether he gives me a severe shock which might unhinge my reason, he declaims in a very loud voice that sounds as if it is coming from another world, "Go to your room." I am about to obey, although my legs suddenly feel very spineless, when he proceeds in the same tone of voice. "If you are detected once more wasting your study hours in the halls, I regret to inform you that we shall probably be forced to conclude that the Catholic Church can manage to muddle through without you," or words to that effect. "This," he continues, growing more devastating with each word, "is a serious business. You are preparing to guide immortal souls to God. That is a job for a big man and a serious man, and sometimes I am inclined to suspect that you are frivolous and light-headed." Well, I must say that I am somewhat taken aback. I had always thought of the old rector as a nice, pious old man who wouldn't disturb a mosquito even if it was biting him. But now I perceive that when he believes that anybody is playing fast and loose with God, he can be a very overpowering character indeed. I mumble something apologetic and go to my room, where, with the logic which I have learned from my study of St. Thomas Aquinas, I come to the conclusion that if, as the rector says, I am light-headed, I had better get busy making my head heavier. Thereafter, I seldom, if ever, waste time in the corridors, except maybe when Notre Dame is playing army or there is a new pope being elected, at which times even the rector relaxes. I also decide to do more praying in future, because I am sure the rector will be in favor of that too. The beginning of my beautiful friendship with O'Malley takes place in a most unusual way. It is the night Father Reardon is laid out in state in the seminary chapel. Father Reardon, at this time, that is, before he dies, is our history teacher. He is also our instructor in railroading, although this is not in the curriculum. Father Reardon had been a locomotive engineer before becoming a priest, and it is common talk around the seminary that you can do better in class by knowing about trains than about the French Revolution. For this and other reasons, he is much beloved, and we pray very hard for him when he departs from this earth. Everybody takes turns staying beside his casket and praying. It happens this night that Pat O'Malley and I are the watchers from 1 to 2 a.m. It is our first experience of this kind, and we are young enough to feel somewhat uncomfortable with the dead, although normally they are the most peaceful people in the world. Anyhow, we are kneeling there praying and telling God how much we think of Father Reardon, and how we hope that he is in heaven, when all of a sudden he sits up in the casket and utters a sound that can only come from the next world. Pat howls and is out of the chapel in a wink, and I am right on his heels. An instant later, we are pounding on the rector's door, hoping he will open it before Father Reardon arrives. We are yelling, "Monsignor! Monsignor!" in frantic fashion. In a moment, he opens the door, looking very tousled and alarmed, probably thinking that the seminary is burning to the ground, or the Ku Klux Klan is on the loose. "What's wrong, boys?" he inquires. "It's Father Reardon," we jabber at him, waving our arms. "He's come back to life!" The rector makes no comment on this, probably feeling that it is a statement calling for a healthy skepticism. He follows us to the chapel, and we stand back to allow him to enter while we peer through the door. Sure enough, there is Father Reardon, sitting up in his casket in front of the altar. I decide that the rector is a very brave man, if not downright rash, because without further ado, he goes to Father Reardon and feels his pulse. Then he motions us to enter. Pat does not respond. He would not have gone into that chapel for the Pope. I, however, step inside and approach, quaking. The rector says, "Call the undertaker." It seems to me that it would be smarter to call the bishop or the College of Cardinals or somebody, because this looks like the biggest miracle since the raising of Lazarus from the dead. However, I have long since learned that it is wise to do as the rector says, and I do so. When the undertaker comes, he goes into the chapel without any to-do, and unceremoniously pushes Father Reardon back in the casket as he was before. The rector comes out, and we ask him what happened. It is very simple. Father Reardon had died sitting propped up in bed. Rigor mortis had set in, and he had to be tied down in the coffin. One of the bonds had come loose, and he had sat up. The sound we heard was his lungs filling with air. Well, it is going through a harrowing experience such as this which makes two hearts beat as one, like Pat O'Malley's and mine. Another exciting day around the seminary is over a rumor that some of the fellows are going to be sent to Rome for advanced studies. Of course, practically every seminarian wants to go to Rome, as they would like to see the main office, so that the next morning, a lot of the boys look like something the cat dragged in, because they have been unable to sleep for thinking that maybe they will be selected for the honor. However, I look as fresh as a daisy, because I know that although the church always has plenty of troubles, she will have to see much blacker days before she will be sending me to Rome. As I say to Pat O'Malley that day, "Pat, sometimes I lie awake over St. Thomas's proofs for the existence of God, but I will never lie awake over going to Rome." So I stay in the seminary until I am ordained priest. Then I am appointed an assistant pastor at St. Rose Parish, where I am to help Father Tim Malloy, the pastor, or at least not hold him back any more than I can avoid.